It was just another ordinary Tuesday for me, well, for everyone else, that is. For me, though, it was a chance to see my restaurant from a perspective I rarely got to experience, as a regular customer. My name's Greg, and I'm the CEO of this place. Most people don't know it, and that's exactly how I wanted it. I had arranged to visit in disguise, wearing a simple baseball cap, a jacket, and sunglasses. Nothing too flashy, just enough to blend in. I wanted to see how my employees really treated customers, how the kitchen operated, and whether the waitstaff was as friendly as they were supposed to be. The last thing I wanted was to walk in and have them suddenly put on a show for me. No, I wanted to witness things as they truly were. I entered through the back door, a small, unassuming entrance where the delivery trucks usually came in. The smell of sizzling steaks and fresh bread filled the air, familiar scents I'd come to associate with the place I'd built. Once inside, I walked through the kitchen, carefully avoiding making eye contact with anyone. The workers were busy prepping for the lunch rush, moving with precision, just as they had been trained to do. Everything seemed normal, and for a moment, I almost felt like I was just another passerby. I grabbed a seat at the bar, keeping my head down and my hood pulled up. The bartender, a woman named Sarah, flashed a friendly smile as she handed me a menu. "Anything I can get you?" she asked. I nodded, scanning the options before settling on a drink. It was the perfect place to sit, right in the heart of the action. I could see the rest of the restaurant without being noticed. But then, something caught my attention, something I didn't expect. It wasn't the clink of glasses or the chatter of customers. It was the sound of someone crying. I turned my head subtly toward the back of the restaurant, near the kitchen, where I saw the young waitress, Emily, sitting on the floor in a quiet corner. Her face was buried in her hands, and she was shaking as silent sobs racked her body. I froze. The last thing I expected was to witness one of my own employees in distress. I watched her for a few moments, feeling a pang of concern. What had happened? Was it something with the customers? Maybe something personal? I didn't move. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to rush over to her and ask what was wrong, but the other part of me, something darker, knew that if I approached her, it could alter everything. This was the truth, the raw reality of how things were behind the scenes. And I had to know why she was crying before I made any decisions. The next part would determine everything. I stayed in my seat, pretending to be just another customer, as I watched Emily wipe her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform. Her breath was uneven, like she was trying to pull herself together, but it wasn't working. It seemed like she was trying to hide the tears, but I could tell she was struggling. I wanted to help, but I was unsure what to do. After a few moments, she stood up, straightened her apron, and took a deep breath. She tried to compose herself, but the tightness in her shoulders told me she was still on edge. She walked briskly back to the dining area, avoiding eye contact with the other servers and customers. I could tell she didn't want anyone to notice, but it was clear she wasn't okay. The way she moved, almost robotic, like someone who had been through the motions too many times, struck me hard. My curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to follow her. I wanted to know what had happened, but I also wanted to understand why no one had stepped in. The restaurant was busy, bustling with patrons, yet there she was, alone in her distress. I waited for a few minutes before getting up. As I walked toward the dining area, I saw her again. This time, she was talking to one of the kitchen staff. I couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but I could tell something was off. There was an uncomfortable tension in the air, like she was being reprimanded. I edged closer, trying to get a better look without being noticed. I could hear bits and pieces of the conversation now. "I told you, I can't keep doing this, the pressure, it's too much," Emily's voice quivered. The other person, a man named Jason who worked in the kitchen, was speaking in a calm, almost condescending tone. "It's just how it is. You're not the only one feeling pressure. Get over it. This is how it works here." Those words hit me like a punch. Jason, who I had thought of as a reliable worker, was dismissing her pain. I felt a wave of anger building in me, anger at the situation, anger at the way she was being treated. But most of all, I was angry at myself. How could I have let this go on? How had I not seen the cracks in my own restaurant? As I stood there, hidden from their view, I realized the problem wasn't just about Emily or even Jason. It was the culture I had unknowingly fostered. I'd built a place that demanded perfection, pushed employees beyond their limits, and rewarded those who could keep up. And in the process, I'd ignored the emotional toll it took on my staff. Suddenly, Emily caught sight of me. Her eyes widened in surprise, as if she hadn't expected anyone to be watching. There was a moment of silent tension before she quickly turned away, trying to act normal again. But I wasn't going to let it go. I couldn't. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Emily, are you okay?" Her face flushed, and she quickly wiped her eyes again. "I'm fine. Just a bad day, that's all." But I could see through the mask she was trying to put on. The way her hands shook as she smoothed down her apron, the way her voice cracked slightly, she wasn't fine. I didn't want to push her, but I couldn't ignore what I'd just overheard. "If you're having a tough time, you don't have to hide it. You can talk to me, all right? You're not alone here." Her expression softened for just a second before the walls went back up. "It's nothing, really. Just pressure from all sides. You know how it is. I'll be all right." I wasn't convinced. But I couldn't press her further, not here, not now. "I'll be in the back if you need anything," I said, my voice softer now. "Don't hesitate." She nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. I turned away and walked back to my seat, feeling a deep sense of unease. It wasn't just about Emily anymore, it was about the entire atmosphere I had allowed to grow here, and I knew that change had to start now. This wasn't just a moment I could walk away from. It was a turning point. I sat back down at the bar, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the image of Emily's tear-streaked face, her discomfort in trying to mask the weight of whatever was going on behind the scenes. And Jason's response, dismissive, cold. It didn't sit right with me. This wasn't just a case of someone having a bad day. There was something deeper going on, something that had likely been festering for a while. I stared at my drink, my hands still wrapped around it as I tried to sort through my thoughts. How could I have missed this? How had I become so disconnected from what was happening in the restaurant I ran? Sure, I'd been caught up in numbers, profits, and making sure the business ran smoothly, but I had failed to see the human side of it all. As the minutes ticked by, I started to hear the restaurant noise fading into the background. My focus shifted entirely to Emily and her pain. My gut told me that if I didn't act on this now, I might lose her, and worse, I might lose a whole team of employees who felt the same way. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I stood up, walking slowly to the back, keeping my presence as quiet as possible. I wanted to approach the situation delicately, not forcing her to relive anything she wasn't ready to talk about. But I knew something needed to change. I found her behind the kitchen doors, taking a brief break, staring blankly at her phone. She didn't notice me immediately, so I took a deep breath before stepping forward. "Emily," I called gently. She jerked her head up, startled. There was that same moment of recognition, followed by the nervous attempt to regain composure. "Oh, hi, Greg. Didn't see you there." I couldn't help but notice how her voice had shifted, more guarded now, almost apologetic. I could sense she was trying to keep things as normal as possible, probably because she didn't want to make things awkward or cause trouble. "I wanted to talk," I said, my voice steady but with a hint of concern. "About what happened earlier. About everything." Her eyes flickered nervously, and I could tell she was weighing whether to open up or shut me out. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, visibly uncomfortable. "Greg, really, it's no big deal," she said, her tone a little too quick. No, Emily, I interrupted gently. It is a big deal. You're part of this team, and you matter. If something's wrong, we need to fix it, not pretend it's fine. I know it's not easy to talk about, but whatever it is, I want to hear you out. She hesitated for a long moment, and I could see the struggle in her eyes. It was clear she didn't want to burden me, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh and put her phone down. It's just, she started, her voice barely a whisper. The work here, it's a lot. Everyone expects so much, all the time. I try my best, but it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Her words hit me like a gut punch. She was right. Over the years, I had built this business into something that demanded excellence. But in doing so, I had created a pressure cooker environment where my employees had to work harder and harder just to stay afloat. It's like I'm invisible, sometimes, she continued. The more I give, the less it's noticed. And then there are the moments when things go wrong, when things aren't perfect, and I'm the first one to get blamed. I can't keep up with it. Not all the time. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly covered it up. Emily, I never knew you felt this way, I said, my heart aching for her. I'm sorry. This isn't the kind of place I want to run. You deserve better than to feel like you're invisible, and you should never feel like you're alone in this. She blinked, taken aback by my sincerity. But I've worked here for a while now, and I know the expectations. I knew what I was getting into. I shook my head. You're right, but I've been blind to the cost of those expectations. You shouldn't have to carry this burden alone. None of you should. There was a long pause. I could see the uncertainty in her face, but there was something else there too, relief, like she hadn't realized how much she needed someone to truly listen. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and I felt the shift in the air between us. I'll do better, Emily, I promised, my voice firm. We're going to change things around here. No one is going to feel like they're invisible anymore. And if you're ever struggling, you come to me. We're in this together. Her expression softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled, even if it was faint. Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate that. I nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose growing within me. This was the moment everything had to change. No more pretending things were fine when they weren't. I had to create a place where people felt supported, not just as workers, but as human beings. As I walked back to the front of the restaurant, I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me. But this was the first step in making sure that no one else would have to hide their pain in silence. The future of the restaurant wasn't just about profits and growth, it was about the people who made it all happen. And that, I realized, was worth fighting for. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings and reflections. After talking to Emily, I couldn't just let the issue fade into the background. I had to take action, and quickly. It was time for a shift, a fundamental change in how I ran this restaurant. And that meant addressing more than just Emily's tears, it meant tackling the culture that had been quietly destroying the morale of my team. I started by meeting with the management team, the people who had been overseeing the daily operations. I wanted to hear their side of things. Was the pressure on them just as bad? Were they aware of how much strain the staff was under? One by one, they sat down with me in my office, and I saw the unease in their eyes. No one had expected this conversation. But as I began to ask pointed questions about the environment, about what employees were really feeling, the answers came pouring out. It's not just Emily, Greg, Sarah, the bartender, told me. There's been a lot of tension in the back of the house. People are burned out. They're afraid to speak up because they don't want to be seen as weak or incapable. They push through, but they're at their breaking point. I felt my chest tighten. This was more than I had bargained for. We're pushing people to the limit, Jason, the kitchen staff member who had dismissed Emily earlier, admitted quietly, his voice tinged with guilt. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until now. I thought I was just being tough on them, but I didn't see how it was affecting their mental health. I wasn't angry. I understood. I had created a culture where perfection was the standard, and people like Jason, who were trying to hold everything together, didn't realize the damage they were causing. By the end of the week, we had a plan. A new set of guidelines was being introduced, one that focused on fostering a supportive, open environment. I made it clear to everyone, from the waitstaff to the cooks, that they could come to me with their concerns. I would not tolerate a culture of fear or pressure anymore. I didn't want my employees to feel invisible. I wanted them to feel empowered, to know that their well-being mattered just as much as their work performance. I also implemented regular check-ins, starting with Emily. I wanted her to feel like she had a voice, and I wanted to rebuild the trust that had been broken. The next time I saw her, it wasn't in the middle of a crisis, it was in the break room, where she was sitting quietly, drinking coffee. "Hey, how's everything going?" I asked, walking in with a soft smile. She looked up, a little surprised, and then gave a small but genuine smile back. "Better. Things are better, Greg. Honestly, I think the changes are already making a difference. People feel like they're actually being heard now." "Good," I said, sitting down across from her. "I'm glad to hear that. I want to make sure that if anything else comes up, you can always come to me. I've got your back." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since our conversation, I saw real hope in them. "Thanks, Greg. That means a lot." It was a simple exchange, but it felt like a monumental shift. I knew it wouldn't be an overnight transformation, but I was committed to making things right. The next few weeks were a mix of ups and downs. Some of the changes were met with skepticism. Old habits die hard, and many of the employees were still adjusting to this new, more open environment. But gradually, the tension in the air started to dissipate. Conversations became less strained. People started smiling more, and the atmosphere, though still busy, felt more relaxed, more human. One evening, as I was leaving the restaurant after a particularly busy shift, I bumped into Jason outside the kitchen. "Greg," he said, catching up with me. "I just wanted to thank you for pushing these changes. You've got a good team here, and we're starting to feel like we're all in this together. I think we're going to make it." His words struck me, and for a moment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were building something sustainable. Something I could be proud of. As I walked out into the cool evening air, I looked back at the restaurant one last time that night, the lights still shining bright inside. The hum of activity had a different tone to it now, calmer, more harmonious. I knew it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't going to be easy, but it was real. The culture of fear and pressure had been replaced with something better, something worth fighting for. This was just the beginning. The journey ahead was going to be filled with challenges, but I was no longer afraid. We had already taken the first step, and with each passing day, it would get easier. The restaurant, and the people in it, deserved better. And together, we were going to make it happen. The weeks following the changes I implemented were not without their challenges, but I could already feel the shift. The staff seemed more relaxed, more open, and more willing to communicate. They started to trust me, and more importantly, they began to trust each other again. The atmosphere was beginning to transform, but I knew the real test was still ahead. One afternoon, just as the dinner rush was starting, I received an urgent call from the front. There had been an incident. I was immediately on my way, my heart racing as I hurried to the restaurant. When I arrived, I was met with an unexpected scene. There was shouting from the front, and the tension in the air was thick. Several customers were looking confused and angry, while Sarah, the bartender, was trying to calm them down. It turned out that a food order had been severely delayed, something that happened occasionally, but this time it had set off a chain reaction. One of the customers, a regular, had started to raise his voice, making harsh demands. But this wasn't the same kind of tension I was used to seeing. It wasn't just about bad service, it was deeper, more personal. The pressure was starting to build again. As I walked closer, I could hear snippets of the conversation. "I've been waiting an hour. Do you even know who I am?" the customer yelled, his face flushed with frustration. "I don't deserve to be treated like this." Sarah, trying her best to remain calm, replied, "I'm really sorry, sir. It's just a delay, but we'll get your food to you as soon as possible." I could see the strain in her face, and I knew instantly that this was a breaking point. The weight of the restaurant's expectations, combined with the high-pressure situation, was pushing her to her limits. This was the test I had been waiting for. Would my efforts to change the culture really hold up under pressure? I stepped forward, taking a deep breath. "Sir, let's all just calm down," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I understand you're upset, but there's no need to escalate this. We're all doing our best, and sometimes things don't go according to plan. I can assure you, we'll take care of this." The man turned to me, his expression changing as he saw me standing there. There was a flash of recognition, but I could see the tension still lingering in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. "Why should I believe you?" "I'm Greg," I said, offering a calm smile. "I'm the owner of this restaurant." His eyes widened for a moment, the realization that I wasn't just some random manager sinking in. But instead of softening, he glared at me. "Well, that doesn't make me feel any better. You should have your staff under control. I've been coming here for years, and this is how you treat your loyal customers." I didn't flinch. I knew I had to stay composed. "I'm sorry for your experience, but I can assure you, we value every customer here, and we're going to fix this. Just give us a moment." I turned back to Sarah, who was still standing there, looking on edge. "Why don't you take a break? I've got this." She nodded gratefully and stepped away from the scene, her shoulders sagging with the relief of not having to carry the entire situation on her own. I walked the customer to a quieter section of the restaurant, where we could talk without everyone staring. "Sir, I understand you're frustrated, but let's work together on this," I said, taking a seat across from him. "What can I do to make this right?" He sat down with a huff, still visibly angry but willing to talk. "I just want to feel like I'm being respected, like I'm not just another number in your system." I nodded, hearing the truth in his words. "I get it. You're not just another number, and you're right, this shouldn't have happened. I promise you, we're going to do better. I've worked hard to create a place where people feel like they matter, both the staff and the customers." The tension slowly started to dissolve. By the time the meal arrived, he was calmer, and I could see that he had started to appreciate the effort I was making. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Later, when I caught up with Sarah, I made sure to thank her for handling the situation as best she could. "You did great," I told her. "I could see how hard that was, and you kept your composure. But if you ever feel that pressure again, don't be afraid to lean on me. We're a team, and we've got each other's backs." She smiled, the weight in her eyes finally lifting. "Thanks, Greg. That really means a lot. I'll be okay." It wasn't just about the incident with the customer, it was about everything that had led up to that moment. It was a reminder that old habits were hard to break. Pressure would always be a part of the business. But now, the way we handled it, together, was different. As I walked back through the restaurant, I looked at the faces of my employees. They were working hard, but now there was something new in their expressions, a quiet confidence. They knew that they had the support of each other, and that made all the difference. This was the real test, the moment when everything could have fallen apart. But we hadn't let it. And in that moment, I realized something even more important: we were stronger than before. We were building something not just sustainable, but truly meaningful. This was what I had fought for. And it was only the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope. After the incident with the difficult customer, I knew we had turned a corner, but I also knew that it wasn't over. The cultural shift was still in its infancy, and every day brought new challenges. The restaurant was busier than ever, and the pressure was still present. It always would be, especially during peak hours. But now, the way my team faced the pressure was different. They didn't feel like they were alone anymore. And I didn't either. I spent a lot of time with the staff, not just talking about work, but about life, about the struggles they were facing both inside and outside the restaurant. I wanted to show them that they were more than just workers to me, they were people who mattered. One evening, I sat down with Emily again. It had been a couple of weeks since our first conversation, and I wanted to check in with her. She had been noticeably more confident and composed, but I wanted to make sure the changes were sticking. "How have things been going for you?" I asked, sitting down at the small table near the kitchen. Emily smiled, though it was a tired smile. "Better. A lot better, actually. I don't feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. I know I can come to you if something's wrong." I nodded, appreciating the honesty. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You've been doing great, and I want to make sure you know that. But if anything's bothering you, don't hesitate. This is your space, too." She looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Honestly, Greg, it's not just me. A lot of people are starting to open up. Sarah mentioned the other day that she feels like she can finally take a breather without worrying about everything collapsing. It's like people are breathing again." That was a moment of triumph. It wasn't just Emily, the whole team was starting to feel the weight lifting off their shoulders. I had begun to see something I hadn't expected, a sense of camaraderie, of people looking out for each other, instead of competing to survive in a high-stress environment. But even with all of this, I knew we couldn't stop there. There would always be moments when pressure and stress would rise again. The real test would be how we handled it, how we rebuilt when the inevitable cracks appeared. A few days later, I had another reminder of how fragile this progress could be. The restaurant was packed, and a series of small mistakes started to pile up. A delayed order here, an order made wrong there. And with every mistake, the anxiety in the air grew thicker. The old tension started to creep back in, like a shadow lurking just beyond the light. I could feel it. My staff felt it too. I watched Sarah, who had been one of the most vocal supporters of the new approach, her face slowly slipping into frustration as she tried to manage the bar. I could hear the low hum of complaints from the kitchen staff. Jason was on edge, his movements sharp and irritated. It was happening again. The pressure was mounting, and if we weren't careful, everything we had worked for could collapse in on itself. I stepped into the kitchen, where Jason was trying to stay on top of orders. He looked up, his face a mask of stress. "We're falling behind," he said, his voice strained. "Orders are getting messed up. I can't keep up with this." I took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment where I had to show them what we had learned. "Jason, take a step back," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're not alone in this. We're all in this together, and we need to communicate more. We've got to make sure no one's carrying the load on their own." He looked at me, a little surprised. For a moment, he didn't respond, but then he nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been pushing too hard. Maybe I've been expecting too much from everyone. We all need to watch each other's backs," I said firmly. "We can't let the pressure break us. Let's all take a deep breath, step back, and focus on helping each other out. One thing at a time." I could feel the atmosphere shifting, just slightly. Jason went back to the line with a renewed focus, and I watched as the kitchen staff began to settle, communicating with each other to smooth out the errors. Sarah, too, found her rhythm again, handling the bar orders with precision, her energy calming down. By the end of the night, the rush had passed. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been manageable. Everyone had come together, supporting each other, and it felt like we were learning to thrive under pressure, not just survive. As I walked through the restaurant, I could see the staff moving with a renewed sense of confidence. There was still some tension, but it wasn't the same suffocating kind that used to fill the air. There was a new kind of energy, something that came from knowing they weren't alone, that I was in it with them, every step of the way. That night, before I left, I stopped by Emily's station once more. She was taking a short break, leaning against the wall. "How are you feeling?" I asked, looking at her with a smile. She smiled back, but this time it was more than just a polite smile, it was genuine. "I think we're finally getting it, Greg. We're actually doing this. It's not easy, but we're making it work." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride. "We'll keep getting better. One step at a time." And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. The road ahead would always have its obstacles, but we were finally moving in the right direction. We were building something real, something strong. And we would continue to rebuild, together. It had been months since the changes had begun.